transcribed from Tom Breneman's own restaurant on Vine Street between Hollywood and Sunset Boulevard, Kellogg's All Bran and Procter & Gamble's Ivory Flakes serve you breakfast in Hollywood. Friends, here's one of the luckiest and best-fed men in Hollywood. The man who can walk into the back of his restaurant any day and face stacks of sizzling sirloins, who can face barrels of beautiful butter, who can face fillets of fine fish. So here he is, that old fish face, Tom Breneman.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Yes, and good morning to you out there at the other end of the network. Good morning from the ladies having breakfast in Hollywood. We've got a big docket today. I'm meeting another house full, too. But we kind of like to visit as we open the Ivory Flakes portion of our broadcast, and we're going to do a lot of it this morning. We have them from all over the nation. I think maybe we'll start with you. Who are you?
Lenora of Pasadena, California.
Lenora?
Olive, Pasadena, California.
Olive.
Olive, O-L-I-V-E.
Oh, Olive.
Yes.
Oh, you're one of the Pasadena Olives. Well, that's a new one.
Mrs. Norman Thomas Fluke of Los Angeles, California.
Hello. And who are you? You haven't always lived in Los Angeles, though, have you? You.
Mrs. L.W. Coovert, Newport Beach, California.
Mm-hmm. And you?
Margaret Robertson, New Hartford, New York. It's near Utica.
It's near Utica?
That's right.
How big a place is it?
So one day, the manager of the station called me into his office. Now, I'd never done a live show, really, before anybody. I was in the studio. And one day he called me and he says, Shepard? I said, yeah. He said, here's $1.50. He says, I have just called the cab. You pay the cab. He says, you can keep the change. He says, you can keep the change. Now, what I want you to do is take a cab and you go to this address. Okay? And now this is a true story. Listen to this. He said, come on. He says, take a cab and go to this address. And he gives me this letter. See, and at the bottom of the letter is an address. He says, you tell the cabbie, and he says, when you get there, you ask for Mrs. Silverman. I said, okay. I figured I was going to pick up a package or something. He said, now listen, I'll tell you what I want you to do. He says, I want you to do whatever she says, and by the way, be a good sport. I said, okay. His name was Richardson. I said, okay, Mr. Richardson. I figured, well, you know. So I got in the cab, which was downstairs, and I went to this address. Well, I got to this place where I was supposed to go, and it was a big building. It was a Masonic hall. Well, I figured I'm going in to pick up something, or Mrs. Silverman is going to give me an envelope for the boss, something like that. So I walk in through the front door, and there's about 28 million ladies all going in there. Millions of them, millions and millions of ladies. And I walk up to the guy that's taking the tickets there, and I said, where's Mr. Oh, here, let's see, Mrs. Silverman. Mrs. Silverman? Is it Mrs. Silverman here? He says, oh, yes, Mrs. Silverman. Oh, Mrs. Silverman, he's here. Mrs. Silverman. I said, oh, gee, they're expecting me. And this lady with blue hair, and she had this flowered hat. She goes, oh, you're here. Well, how wonderful. The girls are waiting for you. You come right out back to the stage door, come right around to the rear here, and we're ready to go in just about a minute. They're all here, and they're all so excited. I said, excited? About what? Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Well, we ran down a passageway, and I'm following her. Still don't know what I'm about to do. And now we are backstage in the Masonic Hall. And I've still got that crummy letter in my hand that had an address on the bottom. We are now in a little room, and there's about 3 other ladies, and I walk into the room, and Mrs. Silverman says, oh, he's here, girls. And all of them went, hey, oh, he's so cute. I says, what? It just seemed like 30 milliseconds later, there was a swirl of flowered hats, blue hair, and now I am out on a stage, and there's 28 million ladies wildly applauding. And Mrs. Silverman is on the podium with a microphone that must have had 7,000 watts of audio, and she is saying, ladies, and now we're about to begin. He's here, the young man who is going to play Tom Breneman for us, the young man who is going to entertain us for the next hour and a half. Ladies, let's give him a big hand. And these women went ape. They're screaming and yelling, knocking over their coffee. There's thousands of them all sitting at tables down there. Well, I stepped up to the microphone, and there they were, all waiting for me to say something. I caught one word. She said the word Tom Breneman. Well, this was at the end of the career of Tom Breneman. You remember Tom Breneman? Do you know anything about him? Well, Tom Breneman did one thing. For years, he did this radio show out of Hollywood. Well, my mind, I wanted to kill that Richardson. I wanted to get back and kill him. I mean, I don't care whether he's a boss or not. And all these ladies are watching. With that, I turned and I said, well, thank you, Mrs. Silverman. And I want to say, what a great feeling it is to be out here in front of all you wonderful, lovely girls. There wasn't one of them there that was under 65. And I could hear those girdles creaking, and I could hear them yelling and whooping and hollering. They were knocking over the ginger ale, and one of them threw her hat up in the air. And with that, I turned, and Mrs. Silverman had her hat on. She was sitting right next to me on the podium, see? Well, I grabbed her great big flowered hat. I said, now, girls, isn't this a wonderful hat that Mrs. Silverman is wearing? Let's give it a big hand. And they all went, oh! And I said, watch, girls. And I put it on my head, and they went out of their bird. That's all Tom Breneman ever did. He put ladies' hats on his head. Well, I don't know what there is about putting a lady's hat on your head in front of women that makes them all, want to knock the table over. And they scream and yell and they hit each other. When I put the hat on, for the next hour, I kept putting other ladies' hats on. And I kept, pinching them and yelling and calling them girls and telling them how cute they were and drinking their ginger ale. And all the while I'm thinking, all I was realizing out of this was 40 cents, which I kept out of the change for $1.50. And I'm sweating. I must have lost 15 pounds. And finally, with a great roar of applause and a scream and a dish of chicken a la king in one hand and a flowered hat in the other, I got back in another cab and went all the way back to the radio station. That was the first live show I ever did. There's an old Indian slogan. When you want to teach a kid to swim, throw him in the water. If he drowns, all right. If he learns to swim, he'll never forget it. That was my first live show. There you have the sickening story. I am admitting it. It's out there before you in all of its ghastly, ugly details. And I want to tell you one thing. You got an assignment. You hear me? I am on tomorrow night at 5 minutes past 10, and don't you forget it. All right? There will be some important information on that show that will appear in the final exam. That is your assignment.